All right, guys, Robby here from CrossFit South Bend. Today I'm here with Coach Carl and Coach Brennan, and we are going to be talking about the three main body types. So why is this so important to talk about? Well, because we all come in different flavors and shapes and sizes, and there are different benefits and drawbacks and to each body type, and it just kind of depends on your context. So it just so happens that Brandon, Carl, and I all correspond to each of the unique three body types: the Ectomorph, the Mesomorph, and the Endomorph, and we're going to give you a sense of what those all entail. So I guess to start off, Brandon would technically be the Ectomorph. This is the person who can very easily lose weight, but it's a little bit harder to put on muscle. Carl would be the Mesomorph. Damn it, Carl, he won the genetic lottery. Really easy to build muscle and doesn't take much effort to lose weight. And I'm the Endomorph, kind of the one who can put on muscle decently easy, but it's harder to lose weight. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan, Brandon would be Legolas, Carl would be Aragorn, and I would be Gimli. That's another way to think about it. So,
Google it.
Google it, yeah. If you don't, check it out if you don't know what it is, okay? What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about kind of the general outlines of each of these three different body types and then talk about our own personal experience. So I'm going to start off talking about the endomorph body type. So what are endomorphs typically like? So endomorphs, whenever you hear things like big boned, that's typically what we're referring to. It's someone who tends to have a lot of body mass, both fat mass and muscle mass. Typically these are going to be things like powerlifters and football linemen. You're not going to see too many endomorphs in the NBA. That's not really going to be an appropriate sport. Pros and cons. Well, again, it's all going to be context dependent. If you're looking to be a powerlifter, being an endomorph is pretty beneficial. So it's much easier to put on muscle. If a mesomorph has to expend 1x energy to put on muscle and an ectomorph has to expend 2x, it's a lot easier for an endomorph to put on muscle, but by the same token, it's a lot easier for us to put on fat as well. So many of you who know my story know that, for a long time I struggled with being pretty overweight, and even now I run at just a generally higher body fat compared to someone who would be a mesomorph or an ectomorph. So the cons here are that, it's a little bit harder to lose weight. So in terms of general prescriptions, Precision Nutrition, which is a brand that we really like, they talk about macronutrient ratios for endomorphs being roughly around 35% protein, 25% carbs, and 40% fat. That's not absolute. Even their fans of saying, look, just generally if you're an endomorph, you don't do as well with carbs. So trying to minimize carbs, making it a post-workout thing. Try to have non-starchy vegetables with most of your meals and make fruits and starches kind of a post-workout thing. And I would say this would correlate pretty well with my experience of things. Is I tend to do better with higher fat, higher protein, and lower carbs. When I have off-plan stuff, it's a little bit harder to lose, but I also tend to gain a bit more in the way of muscle while doing that. So that kind of gives you a sense of what the endomorph is like. Let me pass it over to Carl to talk about the mesomorph.
Yeah, so we're going to go over the mesomorph. This is going to be kind of more your general athletic build. When you see someone like, man, they look like an athlete, whether or not, this is probably the mesomorph that we're talking about. So they have a greater muscle density compared to maybe the endomorphs. We can put on generally muscle a little bit easier and also kind of lose weight easier compared to Robby, and then compared to Brandon, I could probably put on muscle size a little bit easier than he could. Tend to have a higher testosterone / growth hormone dominant side of things that really falls in lines with the traits that you're seeing, the ability to put on size relatively easy when compared to the two different brands. And then we also tend to do best on kind of a mixed diet as well, more of the 40-30-30, so 40% carb, 30% protein, and 30% fat. Now, reflecting back kind of on my experience as being a meso, that was definitely what I started off with when I kind of really got into things, was the zone diet, and that's the zone prescription right there. So I would say that's really when I started to flourish as far as athletic performance, as well as body composition, when I was eating within that. But as time's gone on, I found success on other plans with more of an isocaloric 30-30, doing kind of a cyclical keto. I found good responses too. So I want to say it's 100% wedlock. That was my best when I was doing 40-30-30. I've experienced success at both of those. And as far as trying to lose weight, Robby would hate me for this earlier when I said this, but I've never really had to work to try to lose weight, or I don't know if I've been in a position where I needed to lose weight growing up, so I know everyone hates me probably for that, so sorry. But yeah, anything else to add to the Mesomorphs, Robby, before heading off to Brandon?
No, I think, you guys just won the genetic lottery. I think that's pretty much the long and short of it.
Yeah.
All right, you're up.
On to me. Ectomorphs. So ectomorphs are, you're looking at people with smaller bone structures, typically thinner limbs, people like Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise. You're looking at kind of the better looking of the morphs. I'm just kidding. I don't know if they're ectomorphs.
Tom Cruise is definitely not.
Yeah, he's definitely not. He's like 4 foot and he has a tooth in the middle.
How dare you?
Yeah, anyways, so you're looking at endurance athletes, so cyclists, more than likely swimmers, runners, things like that. People who tend to be more thyroid and sympathetic nervous system dominant. You're looking at higher carbohydrate, 55% carbs, 25% protein, 20% fat. Although, I guess anecdotally to me, I spent a lot of time doing cyclical ketogenic and other different ways, and there's a lot of other things going on there with sleep and stress, but I tend to feel better in that regard as well too, than a higher carb. So that might be just an N=1 thing, but that's usually, you're looking at having a faster metabolic rate, higher carbohydrate tolerance needs. So I've fought my genetics and tried to gain muscle for the longest time and always had issues with it, but I could go outside and start running after not running for a year, and then I could fall back into the groove within a month or two and be lean and be good at running, but again, clawing and scraping for every PR that I've ever had in lifting. So yeah.
So yeah, guys, that gives you a good sense of the three main body types. And again, this is not absolute by any means. This is just sort of a starting point. And one of the things I've run into recently is I have a couple people who I'm working with right now where on an in-body scan, their muscle mass, this one woman in particular, her muscle mass is at 135% of, what it should be relative to her height and age and all the rest of that stuff, which is incredible, but she has a hard time losing body fat. Well, that's an endomorph. And on the flip side, for someone who's taller and leaner, I'm working with someone right now who's trying to put on size. Well, that's going to be a relevant consideration for someone who's an ectomorph to put on size and muscle. So it's a framework, it's a guide, it's something that you can try. And if you're an endomorph, just know it's going to take a little bit more to lose weight, but it's going to be easier to build muscle. If you're an ectomorph, it's going to be a little bit harder to build muscle, so you got to do some extra stuff, but it'll be easier to lean out. And if you're a mesomorph, you just win at everything in life, and there are no problems with that. Anything else to add, guys, before we sign off here?
Good.
No, other than, if you decide you want to start this journey to play around with these percentages, you're going to have to be aware of how much you currently eat and what that looks like in relation to that before you actually start changing some of that over. But, so it's going to be a chore. It's going to be something you'll have to work toward, but yeah.
Yeah, know where you're at to know where you're going.
Yeah, and if you're not eating real whole food to begin with, this is like a layer up from that, so get that real whole food foundation in place, and then this is something you can play around with. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.